Okay, so I think we have everybody back. So I have up the Jamboard for everybody to see some of the challenges. So certainly background noises, distractions, other distractions that we have that we're trying to multitask and get other things done. I like this one up here in the right hand corner that we can't always see facial expressions or body language either in large groups, or sometimes that I think can be challenging on a Zoom to follow along because that eye contact and things gets lost sometimes with Zoom. It's not always easy to hear or understand, so we can talk about accent or just volume of the speaker. Um, I think this is sort of a little bit with multitasking that we try to get everything, think about what else we have to get done that day, just daydreaming. So a lot of distraction, absolutely. So great job with talking about that. We're going to move forward here. Is everybody seeing my slide again? Okay, perfect. Just want to make sure sometimes was switching. So some of the challenges that we came up with. Um, First, again, listening is often neglected as a communication skill and you don't receive a lot of formal instruction on listening. There's a sense of frustration or failure if you can't understand every word, especially if there is an accent or if you yourself are um, English is your second language, third language, not understanding every word, the vocabulary being used. Teresa, you want to add some of them in?
Sure. Missing information can cause anxiety and stress. And I think that kind of goes to the comment on the Jamboard about not understanding. If you don't understand what the person is talking about, that can also make it more challenging. Sometimes people speak too fast. Often um, that can be, especially when you're listening to a native speaker, when we reduce our words and we blend our speech, even sometimes using idiomatic phrases, which sound to kind of sound very quick if you are a non-native speaker. Can't keep up with all the information that's coming at you at one time, right? So students have said to me, trying to take notes on Zoom can sometimes feel, like it's just coming so fast that it's hard for them to get everything. Listener typically has just one go at it. So what that means is that if you're reading something, you can go back and reread it again, right? If you're writing something, you can choose your words, you can rewrite it another way if you're not sure. But when you're listening, you don't really have much control over what other people say or what is being kind of put out to you. So the presence of stress, rhythm, intonation, etc., can be confusing. So if you are new to the United States, or if your English is just not that fluent to the point where you understand intonation and word stress, that can cause a lot of confusion too. So and just that is something that we will address on Thursday in the workshop on pronunciation. Just to let you know, Thursday night at 8 o'clock. So. Did you want to take the rest, Kayla?
Sure. So there's often the need to process and respond immediately, where, again, as Teresa mentioned, writing and reading have kind of a longer time period where you can have this thoughtful reflection, but listening needs some type of more immediate processing. Nonverbal clues help, but other distractions can interfere. Again, as mentioned on the Jamboard, maybe you can't even see those nonverbal clues, or just those other distractions get in the way. Long periods of listening can be exhausting, especially at the end of a day when you've been listening to multiple lectures. You're just tired of listening. It's hard to find quality resources, recordings, video clips, movies, conversations with English speaking people. So this can be a challenge as well for our non-native speakers, just being able to find resources to practice. So let's talk a little bit about what active listening is compared to passive listening. So in this visual, you can see that there are 5 stages of active listening. So the first one is just receiving, and we receive a lot of different sound inputs all at the same time, right? So right now, um, I might listen to someone who adds in a comment while I'm also listening to my heater in the background. In a little bit, I might hear my children running upstairs. And I have to filter out which one I want to focus on. And everybody has all of those different times where you have to do that. If you're sitting in a physical classroom, you might hear people talking in the hallway, or you might hear someone's phone ding, and you're also trying to listen to the actual lecture. And so, again, you have to filter out the sounds that are not important and focus on the ones that are important. And so that's the first step, is just receiving, filtering out the other sources to isolate the actual message you want. Second stage is understanding. And so in this is where we attempt to learn the meaning. And this one can be challenging because we may make mistakes based on our background or our own experiences that make us interpret it in a different way. And so this understanding can, happen during this stage. It also can mean that you're having trouble making meaning because you're missing out on vocabulary that you need, or maybe you're listening to someone with an accent and aren't quite understanding the words. The next stage is remembering. And so in this case, you need to process it meaningfully in order to turn it into the long term. So remember, otherwise, at the end of it, 50% you'll remember, 50% you won't. After 1 hour, down to 20%. So otherwise, you need to put it in long term so that it does, so you do retain it. And in this case, you also have to make sure that the second stage you understand it correctly, because if you retain it as incorrect information, then obviously the recollection is also going to be incorrect. So those have connections there. And the fourth stage is when you evaluate. And then the fifth stage is the feedback. And so in the feedback, this is where you're indicating your involvement. So listening isn't just something where you sit back and let it flow through. You also need to be involved in some way. And so what do you think is a way that you can be involved with feedback, say in a classroom? What is something you can do that shows that you have involvement?
Kayla, Amy put a question in the chat, and I think that kind of speaks to the feedback too. So she asked, I'm finding it very hard to connect with people because of mask wearing, unless if your eyes are very expressive. Everyone looks emotionless with masks on. Any ideas? And I think that also kind of goes to that stage 5, right? Like, how do we respond to people because we don't realize how much we rely upon those nonverbals, especially smiles and, things like that. So I do think that that kind of plays into that. One of the things that I noticed with the feedback, Amy, just to kind of answer your question, because I'm the same way, and you don't realize how much sometimes when we're listening to people that we actually read facial expressions and things like that. So I know that's a challenge. Even some people rely on lip reading, as even if they don't realize they're doing that, they do. So I know that can be very difficult, especially for non-native speakers when they're trying to learn the language. They kind of mimic the placement of our lips and things like that for correct pronunciation. So this is hard. I try to be expressive when I'm even wearing a mask, like, looking people, eye contact is more direct, I think now is one thing I've noticed. I don't know, Kayla, if there's anything else that you would add to that. More hand gestures sometimes I notice.
I
Yeah.
know when I'm speaking to, people, I appreciate when people are nodding as I'm speaking, because you feel like they're understanding what you're saying. If somebody's just sitting there staring motionless with no way of telling you because you're the speaker that they're getting what you're saying, I just find like people nodding once in a while that I agree, or I get that too, or something like that is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel the same on Zoom. Sometimes I really appreciate the videos on, and understand that they're not, but that I can see people and see that they're nodding or smiling to me like, okay, they are listening, they are processing this. Otherwise, I'm talking to the black hole that I can't tell. Um, so absolutely. I think with the mask, yeah, there's a lot of different issues going on. You can't see those nonverbals reactions. I think volume is sometimes an issue because it's muffled behind the mask, and then often maybe it's in a store and there's those external noises plus like the plexiglass in front, and so it's often like, and I think it's okay to recognize like, well, sorry, I couldn't hear you because of the mask. Giving those nonverbal responses so that they understand. It's not necessarily what they said. It's just, hey, it's a challenge for both of us, and having that empathy that, okay, it might take us a couple more times repeating than we normally would. So I think that's definitely a factor. But yeah, in the classroom, even the nodding is great feedback. Also, note taking is a way for this feedback stage, right? So that acknowledges that you are involved when you take notes. And verbal reactions, right? So asking questions or responding to questions, that's that feedback stage. So listening becomes an active process that, again, it's not just going in one ear and out the other. You're doing something with that information. And for yourself, that's going to be longer retention when you take all of these steps. Otherwise, that middle stage of remembering, again, when you finish, you're going to walk away with a lot less of the information. And you don't want to waste your time. You want to make sure that you get the most value out of it.
Okay, so let me adjust this here because I can't see everything on my screen. All right, so sustained active listening. So while Kayla is setting us up to go into breakout rooms, these are just some things to be aware of. Whether you're an instructor or whether you're interacting with people on Zoom or face-to-face on campus, or if you're a student facing the speaker. I'm really aware of that in the classroom. Like I always try to be facing the room, even if I have to put something up on the board. That can be difficult when you're teaching certain subject matter. Like I know I've seen like math tops and things like that where they're working out a problem and talking it through. So I know that's not always possible, but I do try and face the speaker. Even on Zoom, I'm working on 2 screens. So I try to keep looking, like going from screen to screen, looking at them. Being attentive but relaxed is going to help you listen better. If you are very tense or if you're sitting in an uncomfortable position, you're not going to be able to sustain that. Keeping an open mind, right? Because I think this is a barrier to good listening too. Judging what is being said. So especially what's going on socially around us, I think this has been a huge issue, right? We don't often want to hear what other people are having to say about things. A good technique, if you're not sure of what someone is talking about, or if you're trying to understand it better, is to visualize it. Just kind of mental picture of things using kind of what you know already about a subject. Avoid interrupting, but ask questions to clarify during pauses. And I think that's an interesting one. And when we go into breakout rooms, I'm kind of curious to see what your experience on Zoom is with that. And then taking notes. That can be difficult to write things down as you're listening. And I know sometimes I've seen where PowerPoints are kind of flipping really fast. That can be very difficult. Noticing and using nonverbal cues. We already talked about that in Zoom. That's kind of minimalized as well, but it's important if you can do that. And then as a speaker, to also keep in mind, are you using those nonverbals? Participating in the discussion. Right. So yes, we will only remember maybe 20% of what we hear long term. But I don't know about you, but if I talk to someone, if I have a discussion about things, I tend to remember that a lot longer. And then referring to prior course content. Can you link what you're hearing to other things that you already know? And that's often helpful too in a classroom setting. So now when we move this into online, synchronous and asynchronous, you're still listening, right? So in an asynchronous class, you have a lot of video content and that can get tedious over a long time, right? So if we're watching, even, I know Kayla had said about sharing the Zoom, but it's not as interactive. So listening for long periods of time can be difficult in an asynchronous setting. So give online classes the same importance as you would an in-person class. Make yourself visible using the camera. I know a lot of people don't like to do that, especially, if you, I don't know, because I've seen with students, it's, well, it's really early and I didn't really get dressed for the class. Well, we talked about this in the study skills. Treat this class like any other. Keep your routines, get dressed, get up and do your normal daily routines and be in class. Using technology to engage, the emoticons, raise your hand, the chat, monitor and eliminate distractions, which is something we talked about also in study skills. If you feel that you are starting to drift off, which everybody does, redirect your attention. So try and heighten that awareness. Establish and leverage a network. If you miss something, or if your technology fails, which has happened to all of us, have someone there that you can come back to later and say, can I get the recording, or did you get those notes that I missed? Practicing time management is also important. Getting yourself there on time or early, having everything you need around you to take notes and listen comfortably. Again, even in a synchronous Zoom class, you should participate. Don't rely too heavily on technology. Some of my students will say to me, well, is this recorded? Am I going to get this? Right? So don't always, rely on the fact that somebody is recording a Zoom. And taking notes, right? Just like you would in a normal classroom, it's important to take notes. So, Kayla, do you have the breakout rooms ready?
Yes, I do. So I will go ahead and open those.
In the breakout,
Hey, Kayla,
Hey.
we didn't know what we were supposed to be doing.
So you're just talking about some of the challenges that you have, whether in the classroom or specifically online, and just kind of talking through those of what are your challenges, your classroom challenges, or in your work life, just like you did kind of in the previous one of saying the mask, but just diving a little deeper, looking at what we just talked about as far as classroom setting or
Okay.
online.
Can you send me back in that room? Was room
Yep.
3?
Yes. Let me see. I think I have to, let me put you in a different room and then back into that
Okay.
one. So don't ignore the first one and then I'll move you.
Okay.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Hi, Professor.
Um, Kayla, we got some good comments in our breakout room. Do you mind if I just share them quickly?
I don't mind at all.
So I think um, hard to get motivated in Zoom classrooms, and that went to that what we were saying before about when you're really just not into, you know what I mean? Like it's just not, you're not interested. Also, too, we talked about that in a Zoom classroom, it's hard to kind of make that mental shift that this is really a classroom when you're sitting in your bedroom, right? Trying to get into a Zoom on your iPhone or something, right? So that that motivation can be an issue. And then the network delays. Some people with the internet issues. So if you're talking and, you know, I've experienced that myself with students. There's like a couple of second delay in everything I say, and that can be a challenge as well.
Anybody else from any of the other breakout rooms want to share anything?
Yeah, we talked about when you're on a Zoom or you're, you know, at a webinar or something, and your ability to multitask while doing that impedes your ability to really understand what's going on. That we, you know, if according to your statistic, you know, you remember less than 20% of what you've heard an hour from now. If you're only passively listening and not actively listening, I don't even want to guess what the percentage is of what you retain if you're, you know, like if I'm on a webinar or something and I think, you know, oh, I'm a good multitasker, I can do other things while I'm doing this, and you know, I'll be answering emails, and then all of a sudden I'll realize while I'm answering this email, I've completely missed the entire subject of what was just going on. Like my ears just like shut off to it. And although you think you can do it, if you're making the time to attend it, you ought to give it, and the presenters have prepared information. The least you can do is pay attention. And I'm trying really hard, and I haven't multitasked yet during this Zoom, just so you know. You know, I think if you try really hard to pay attention and to try not to let all that other stuff come into your head about the other things you have to do, and I have all these emails to answer, and I have another meeting right after this Zoom and all that stuff. If you try to just funnel your attention as much as you can to what you're doing at this particular time, I think you haven't wasted your time then. It's about your time too. You know, it's about not you know, being on here for an hour and you're doing so many other things, you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I don't even know half of what they said. So that's my contribution. And I'm not going to do anything else while I do this.
I think that's really important. And I also think, you know, even in a personal life, like I try, and I noticed that's one of the things I noticed even as a mom, right? And especially when you work, like when I come home, if my kids are talking to me, I'm not with them all day. I really am I listen, right? Like, and I think that shows that we, you know, respect people and we care too. Like that's something I myself have noticed. So I agree with you on that.
And to add to what Amy was saying, because we were talking about, you know, multitasking, and, you know, I've always been told there's no such thing as multitasking. You either put your 100% attention to whatever you're doing, even if that 5% is to listen around you, to see what's, you know, around you. If you take as much time to just focus on what's being said to you, you kind of understand what's going on, what's being said, how you can interpret it, how it could be misinterpreted too, because if you're actually listening, you're trying to figure out what is actually being said to me and how can I use that to do whatever it is that I'm doing. But yeah, turning off the telephone or put it on mute or whatever it is that you have to do in order to just focus on what's in front of you, and knowing that other people have put their time into telling you or talking to you or just, you know, giving you some words of advice or whatever. As long as you're engaged, I guess is the word, then that's, you know, that's respected their time and your time as well.
Lee made a really important comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Kayla.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, in our breakout room, one of the students that are attending, Lee, he mentioned that if he does not get something, he will ask the speaker, would you mind repeating that? And I think a lot of times students don't like to do that, or they feel it might be rude, and it's not, if you do it politely, right? So to say, I'm sorry, I missed what you were saying, would you mind repeating that? And especially in a class where you know there's going to be a test and that content is important. And it also shows the teacher you are listening, right? If you miss it, it's okay, but it shows the teacher that you are paying attention.
Yeah, and I think there can be challenges to that, of course, if it's a very large lecture that it's hard to kind of interject those questions. And again, that's where establishing that network of who can you rely on maybe in the class that you can also ask, hey, I really missed this part. Did you understand it? You know, and making those connections then and filling in maybe your notes where you missed a spot if you feel like it's not an opportunity. I mean, I've been at conferences where it's thousands of people listening, right? And there's something maybe I missed and for whatever reason, and you can't stop that speaker and say, hey, I missed that part. So you have to fill in the gaps of that's not always a solution, but definitely is. And I think that same thing with trying to really just be present, you know, would you do it if you were face to face? Would you do that same behavior? And I fall to this too, is like, oh, in a meeting at work, I wouldn't, you know, check my phone for a face-to-face meeting that I'd be having, but on Zoom, it's like, it's sort of invisible. They can't really tell that I'm checking that, right? Or the same goes for maybe a small lecture that you have that the teacher can see you more readily, and so you wouldn't be as tempted. But when it's a large lecture hall, it's like, I'm in the back of the room, they can't see me, right? So those temptations that you have because of maybe that invisibility that you think you have, but even more reason to make yourself more engaged. And when you have the opportunities, you know, this is where it's still really important if you are face to face, sitting as close to the front as you can, so that you avoid some of those distractions that happen when you sit in the back of a lecture hall. That one, because you think you're invisible, or two, then you're seeing, oh, this person in front of me is on Facebook, and this person in front of me is doing this, and you start paying attention to what everybody around you is doing as opposed to the actual lecture. So some of that comes into play as well. Any last comments before I move on?
I was just going to make a comment.
Go ahead.
Okay, because I was thinking too, even who you are sitting with. So I know some of our students are they're either on campus or they're in residence over, you know, abroad. And if you know that you're on a Zoom or you're sharing, you know, sitting next to with your laptops next to a friend, and you're going to be kidding around, and I can get silly too, as Kayla knows, I like to joke around. But if you know that that person is going to be talking to you or laughing, maybe you might want to find another space and tell your friends you'll meet up later, right? Because I've seen that too, where students start, I can see what you're doing on Zoom. So keeping in mind that, you know, speakers can see what you're doing sometimes. And don't get distracted.
Okay, so for this slide, we are going to watch a short clip. This comes from the TV show The Big Bang Theory, if you are familiar with it. If not, it's okay. But this conversation happens. And so what we want you to pay attention to really are the verbal and nonverbal interactions that happen, and the difference between kind of passive listening and the very active listening, and that last stage, kind of the feedback stage. So I'm going to play this, hoping that my sound is shared. Okay.
Think of that continuum that Kayla showed, right, on response, evaluation, and feedback.
First, there was PlayStation, aka PS1. Then there's PS2, PS3, and now PS4. And that makes sense. You'd think after Xbox, there'd be Xbox 2. But no. Next came Xbox 360. And now, after 360, comes Xbox One. Why one? Maybe that's how many seconds of thought they put into naming it.
Can you get the butter, please?
You know, however, with the Xbox One, I can control my entire entertainment system using voice commands. Up until now, I've had to use Leonard.
Then get the other one. Pass the butter.
Hang on. I don't feel like you're taking this dilemma seriously.
Fine, Sheldon. You have my undivided attention.
Okay, now, the PS4 is more angular and sleek looking.
No way!
It's true, but the larger size of the Xbox One may keep it from overheating.
You wouldn't want your gaming system to overheat?
No, see, well, you absolutely would not. And furthermore, the Xbox One now comes with a Kinect included.
Included?
Yes. Not sold separately. Although the PS4 uses cool new GDDR5 RAM, while the Xbox One is still using the conventional DDR3 memory.
Why would they still be using DDR3? Are they nuts?
See, that's what I thought. But then they go and throw in an ES RAM buffer.
Whoa, wait a second. Who's they?
The Xbox.
You're kidding!
No, I am not. And this ES RAM buffer should totally bridge the 100 gigabit per second bandwidth gap between the two RAM types.
This is a nightmare. How will you ever make a decision?
See, I don't know. What should I do?
Please pass the butter!
Christine liked that clip.
Sorry, I have to get it off my screen
I
here
hate
now.
that they took that show off the air. For anyone that likes her, there is a new show out, just saying. And TV, watching sitcoms is a great way to practice listening.
Okay, so let's just talk real quick about some of what you saw in that clip. So what were some of the differences? So sort of kind of a first conversation and then the second conversation, how they compared.
I feel like neither conversation she really cared. It's just one she was listening to what he was saying and one she wasn't.
Yes, I think that is true. So, you know, she just acted more like she was involved in what he was saying, although she really didn't care. But yes, absolutely. A dramatized version of it, that interaction, that feedback that we give.
I think it also kind of points out too that sometimes we're very, you know, we kind of think like me, right? Like we approach conversations from our own perspective and we're not always, you know, what we have to say is more important than what other people or what we're doing is more important, right? So I think that's an important aspect of that too. Giving others equal time and attention.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, you know, okay, are we fully present with who we're talking to? And if we can't be, we have something else distracting us, just being honest and like, now's not a great time to listen. You know, sometimes I maybe have to say that to my husband, like, you know, I have a million other things going on right now. I really can't sit down and listen because I'm sure that it's something important. So can you give me a couple minutes before we sit down to talk so that I actually am listening as opposed to just letting it in one ear and out the other.
I feel like too that sometimes even when you're listening to the other person, like the filters that we have that take stuff in, here's something very different than what the person is actually trying to tell us. I have a really short, funny story about my husband. I asked him for several weeks to change the oil in my car, and I had been watching Oprah. This is how far back this is. And they were talking about mirroring when someone talks to you. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to do this with my husband when he gets home. So I sat him down and I said, okay, I'm going to say something to you. And then I want you to tell me what you heard, you know, feeling very Oprah-like at that point. And so I said to him, I've asked you for about 3 weeks to change the oil in my car, and I really need you to change the oil in my car. I said, okay, now what did I just say to you? And he said, you said, I never do anything you asked me to. And that is a true story. I mean, he generalized it to everything I ever asked him. In fact, all I was really asking was I wanted the oil changed to my car. But he, you know, so I think people sometimes, even though you think you're making yourself really clear, that they don't always, you know, no matter how clear you're making it, they're not hearing what you're saying. And so I don't know what you can do about that. If you find out, please email me.
We'll have a
My
hard show.
my husband and I are married almost 40 years, so I think it might be too late, but email me anyway if you find out.
Well, clearly he's listening to something. I
All
do
right.
think we go on our past experiences though with people too. So that could be, even in the classroom, I think if you have established kind of an interaction with a teacher or with classmates, keep that in mind, right? That sometimes those past and prior interactions can also impact what we're hearing and how we're listening.
All right, so I'm going to stop sharing, and Teresa, you're going to share your screen. We're going to do a Kahoot. So how many of you are familiar with Kahoot? So just a couple, okay. And so Kahoot is an interactive type of game, just kind of polling type of thing that you can join on your phone, on your computer, probably easiest on a phone if you have one in front of you, by joining kahoot.it. So you can see in the middle of her screen there, join at www.kahoot.it. You don't have to have the app, and then you'll put in the gaming pin.
The students know this, they're in. Is anyone having a hard time getting in? Because if you need an explanation or anything, I can help you. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Do I need to sign up?
Nope, just go to kahoot.it. It's right up on the top where it says join at kahoot.it. So you could just log right in there.
But when
And then-
let me try again.
And then put in the pin. It'll ask you to put the pin in.
Yeah. Okay, I got it.
You got it? Good. Anybody else? We're all good?
Yeah, I think go ahead.
Okay. All right. Start. Okay. Question number 1. What is listening? So yes, listening actually is an active activity, right? It's not just passive hearing. The difference would be to actively make an effort to hear something and be alert. We always hear things all around us, but listening is different. Okay, Annie came in top. It'll tell us at the end who answered all the questions correctly and the fastest. Does listening require your complete focus and attention? Always, yes. Hearing is something that must consciously be done. True or false? False, right? So hearing is not something that's conscious. We hear things around us all the time. Like you may not even realize it, but you'll know, like if somebody comes into your house, I can tell, is it my husband? Is it the dog, right? Or is it the kids? I can hear. I hear things so much that they just become part of my environment. I know when it snowed outside before I even get up because I can hear the plows go by in the morning. So listening is conscious, but hearing is very passive and can be done unconsciously. Miscommunication can cause all but. Yeah, miscommunication can cause all of these except being friendly. Obviously, a miscommunication can have an impact on relationships, friendships, jobs, a lot of different things. So what is a good listening characteristic? Yes, actually, that one was kind of tricky because I was even looking at it and I thought shifting eyes, and I thought, is that changing your eyes to who makes making eye contact? But sitting erect, your posture can show that you are listening and you're engaged. So if you're slumped over or kind of laying back and it just doesn't, then the speaker doesn't know if you're really listening to them or just kind of getting, I don't know, just kind of tuning out. Okay, good. What is a bad listening characteristic? No eye contact. Yeah. Yeah. If you're not looking at someone, and this too, I think is very cultural. Especially, you know, I've had other students from other countries who have said that, you know, they're uncomfortable with eye contact, but it doesn't have to be long, sustained, creepy eye contact, but at least making, you know, looking someone in the eye or looking at their face when, you know, facing them when they're speaking to you. Which is not a strategy for improving listening. Asking a question while the speaker is talking. That's not a strategy, that's interrupting, right? So sometimes this happens, which is not a strategy, right? So sometimes this happens inadvertently. Note taking can be a good strategy for listening because you are actively paying attention, and getting clarification at the end is not a strategy, but I mean, is a strategy, and then facing the speaker is a strategy. So this question was, what is not? What is the benefit of good listening? I wish I could get everything I want just by listening, right? But we sometimes can get good advice, right? We can learn information that we did not have. There's a lot of benefits of good listening. What is a danger of bad listening? Yeah, so if we're not listening, it does affect our ability to learn and take in that information, especially things that we need to know later for tests. How does poor listening not affect a society? So it does not affect a society. So it does not decrease accidental deaths, right? So good listening, poor listening can result in poor productivity. It can affect your business and it can lead to arguments. Our winners. All right, Kayla, I'm going to stop sharing. Congratulations to our winners.
All right. So let's talk about some strategies. We've talked about some throughout, but let's continue. Just recognizing what are your own personal challenges or your own possible challenges. And they may vary depending on the particular situation, right? So we talked about this is my challenge when I'm on Zoom. This is my challenge when I am listening to in person. This is my problem when I'm listening to a meeting. Minimize your potential distractions whenever possible. Content versus function words we'll talk about. Predict by using context clues. Summarize and respond. So right after you've listened, summarize it back to them, kind of that mirror method. If you want to personally say, okay, this is what I heard, is that correct, right? Depending on the level of importance, or it could just be that you summarize writing it down, right? So, okay, this is what I heard today, summarize it, and so you can remember it, or do something with it. Ask questions, trying not to interrupt, making sure it's during a pause. Again, that can be a challenge with Zoom and other platforms, and taking notes. So minimizing distractions and challenges. So there are a couple different types of distractions or challenges. So I categorize them with content. So we talked about it's just not interesting. We're not motivated to do it. We might have an emotional reaction to it. And so this is a challenge because it's something we don't want to hear. So those are reasons we might have to really put particular focus. We might have personal concerns, right? We're just tired. It's early in the morning or it's late at night. We've gone all day. Whatever reason you're tired, it's middle of the day and you're tired. We can all relate to times that we're tired and having to listen. You're hungry. You're distracted because you're hungry. You're distracted because your schoolwork and you have to do all these other things, or we're distracted because we're attending this workshop, but we know we have 10 emails coming in and we have these other things, right? So those are our personal concerns. Might be that family is also a concern. Those all are different challenges we have. And at any given moment, you might have several of these going on, right? So it might not be every single time you're listening, but it might be different times you have different ones. Devices are certainly distractions, right? Email, we see a notification pop up. And that maybe doesn't happen in in-person meetings because we don't have a computer in front of us, but on Zoom we do, and so we see that little bubble pop up, and so this can be a distraction. Chat or social media, background noise. Again, we hear lots of different sounds all the time. Are they ones you can just ignore, or are they ones that are distracting you? It might be that a conversation is happening, that it's your roommate and you hear them talking to someone else, and it's something you can't just drown out. Maybe it's you need to find a different place or ask them to go somewhere else. The speaker can be a distraction, so maybe what they're wearing or their communication style or their age or their gender. Like, we all come into listening with different biases and different interpretations, and so just even that can distract us. Their oral delivery, their volume, their accent, their rate of speech can be a challenge or sometimes a distraction. Some people think like, oh, that accent sounds really nice. I wish, and then we're thinking about that Australian accent or whatever. Or it can be a distraction for some people because they said, I can't understand this particular accent. And then people can be distractions. Our family, our roommates, our classmates, the audience can be a distraction, right? So other people in the class. I fall victim to it on Zoom of like, oh, I saw someone move. What are they doing? Or I see them take a bite of something. Whoa, what are they eating? And again, those split seconds take away from what you are listening and how much you can retain. And so another quote, when we listen to the average speaker, we're using only 25% of our mental capacity. We still have 75% to do something else with. So this is why our minds wander, because we can process it differently. And so we have that ability, like, oh, our mind wants to then multitask, like, oh, I still have this other mental capacity, but trying to make sure we don't do that. I found another study that said that test results have shown that being interrupted by a cell phone message or even expecting one, like thinking you're going to get one, lowers listening by 20%. So again, all of these little distractions that add up and interfere with our learning or our retention of the information.
Kayla, I also think it's important, sometimes my international students will ask questions about stuff like that. And I think in the United States, like, we're kind of expected to multitask, right? So a lot of times it's just become like our way of life, is because we're constantly doing something. And I think a lot of times students find that odd. So I do think that, we have to watch too, like, what have we just gotten comfortable with, or what is part of our lifestyle? So, all right, so the next screen that Kayla has put up is, this is a strategy to improve listening, right? So in the beginning, when we talked about not understanding everything that the speaker is saying, you don't always have to understand every single word that is being said, right? And this is something, I don't know if any of you have attended the reading workshops, right? Even when you're reading, focusing on those content words, right? Words that have a specific meaning in the sentence, the important things, who, what, where, when, right? And then there are function words, words that we don't necessarily need when we're listening. So I'm gonna, Kayla, do you want to play the video? Because you have your everything shared already.
Sure.
This video explains how to listen for content words.
Let's talk about the basic difference between content words and function words. Content words carry meaning. Function words help create grammatical structures. Content words are nouns, such as Jennifer, bee, beauty. Adjectives, for example, exciting, wonderful. Verbs, such as grew, and in the phrase have grown, it's the main verb grown that's a content word. Adverbs, for example, slowly, widely. Numbers are also content words, such as two, hundreds, first. Question words, for example, what, how, why. Long prepositions meaning more than one syllable, for example, against, over. Demonstratives, meaning this, that, these, those. Interjections, such as ow, ouch. Now let's look at function words. Most pronouns are our function words. For example, the personal pronouns, such as I, you. Object pronouns, such as me, them. Forms of to be as the main verb. Modal verbs, such as can and should. Auxiliary verbs or helping verbs. For example, in the phrase had been wasted, had been are the auxiliary verbs, and they are function words. Many little words are function words in English, such as short prepositions, one-syllable prepositions, on, of, to, for example. Possessive adjectives, your, his, their, our, etc. Articles, such as the, a, an. And conjunctions, such as and, but, so.
So if you're a student and or anyone, I'm listening in a class and you're trying to listen to every single word, it's going to be exhausting. You're not going to be able to do that. Most people can't do that, even in a native language. So on the next slide, Kayla will show you how.
Let's talk.
content and function words actually work.
Yeah, so we're going to take a look at two different passages. And so first look at just the left here. These are function words. So this is a conversation happening between a customer and an agent. So notice again, these are function words, ones that have less meaning prepositions and things like that. I'll give you a minute to read it over. Can you make any meaning of it? Probably not, right? Now take a look at the right at content words. So same interaction between customer and agent, but this time we're focusing on the content words. Can you get the gist from the content words? Yeah, right? You know, it doesn't sound totally correct, the grammatical errors in there and things are very choppy, but you can understand the main points and get the main idea. And so this is the idea that as long as you pay attention to those content words, you should be able to understand meaning. And so if you put these two together, then it's the complete conversation, right? Is it possible to change my reservation? So if we take out those function words out of it, we can fully understand it even without those function words. So really paying attention to the content words while you're listening.
Okay. And then two, and I think this is a very challenging thing. And I think this is somewhere where we can potentially fall into some miscommunications. And again, this is something that we will discuss more in the pronunciation workshop on Thursday night. But inference, trying to kind of make a educated guess on what someone is saying or what they mean. So inference is a technique of finding answers from clues and from prior knowledge rather than directly. So if you are trying to make an inference, you need to distinguish between explicit and implicit utterances. Are they joking, right? Are they being 100% real? Like that can be hard sometimes to distinguish, especially when you're just learning the language. And a lot of times that will depend on intonation and tone and context when someone is talking. So assess the situation. Who is saying it? What is happening? What's being said? Where are you? When is it being said? Why is it being said? Right? And yeah, sometimes you are going to infer incorrectly, right? So use prior knowledge. What do you already know about the speaker, about the topic, about the word choices that are being used? Trying putting all of this together, and this processing can take time to do. Paying attention to nonverbals is important. Listening to the tone and the mood, and then narrowing down your guess based upon reason. And I've been in situations myself where later on I've kind of thought about what someone said. I'm like, well, I don't think he really meant that, right? Because I'm inferring. I'm going on all of these different things that are happening at once to make an educated guess on what the person was trying to say or what their true meaning was. So go ahead, Kayla.
Okay, and so as we mentioned earlier, summarizing is also a good technique. After every e-learning session, especially classes, if you have time, write down, okay, here was the main point of this lecture, right? So making sure that you kind of tie that back up, because then that retention goes up. Otherwise, in an hour, it's only 20%. So if you can, within that hour time frame, put down that summary, that'll increase that it goes to long-term memory and you retain more of it. So if you can, it's not always possible because sometimes we have those back-to-back classes and only maybe 10 minutes in between and we have to run and get a drink and other things. But if that's possible to do within that hour, that's best. Paraphrase information to confirm understanding, listen for the gist, write those content words, determine the essential ideas and consolidate the important details, focus on the keywords and phrases, determine they're worth noting and remembering. And then questioning technique. So be an active learner, clarify ideas or meaning, question for further information. Did you mean this? Link with your prior assignments. ask open-ended questions, use hypothetical questions for comparison, think critically, and involve your peers, right? So you might not be able to ask that instructor or the speaker, but you can ask someone else their opinion about it, their interpretation, because again, we're all bringing in our own background, our own perspectives, and sometimes we don't interpret it properly. So we can maybe bounce our ideas off of someone else. So we're going to skip this video here, but we will supply it for you. It's a TED Talk on 5 ways to listen better. So when I email you after the session, I'll email you this link as well. And we'll also give you a TED Talk summary sheet. We think TED Talks are a great way if you want to improve listening skills. There's a variety of different topics. And the nice thing about them is you can also see the transcript. So if you do have trouble with particular vocabulary building and things, you can read the transcript as you're listening, or try listening and then reading over the transcript to fill in those gaps. But we also have this TED Talk summary sheet that will also help you kind of, okay, listened, and now how can I process it? So we will provide that for you, as well as a couple other handouts. Just quick reminders again, these strategies for listening on Zoom: be alert, be alive, acknowledge the speaker with whatever type of nonverbals you can give, nodding if you're on in camera, or the emoticons saying like, yep, I'm here, I'm paying attention. It's also good for yourself, because then you're saying, hey, I am dedicating my time to this. Open your mind, breathe slowly and deeply, relax physically, get comfortable, but not too comfortable that you get distracted. Use your camera, try not to interrupt others, ask questions, stay on topic, take notes. You know, again, that's sometimes a challenge for online classes. And be patient with yourself, be patient with others. It's all been challenging for everyone. Oh, sorry, Teresa, you want to just mention note taking?
Yeah, so one of the things that came up constantly throughout the session is the importance of note taking. And there are methods to do this that you can be more productive and get better quality notes in the end. So that workshop is going to be on January 21st at 8 p.m. And I think we also talked a lot about intonation and tone and understanding those kind of implied meanings when people are speaking. So that workshop will be this Thursday at 8 p.m. So if you are interested in either one of those, the pronunciation, I think, does build a lot on what we said today.
Okay, so we are exactly at time. I'm going to put the survey in the chat. We use this to help us better inform this particular workshop, but also our future planning of workshops. So we appreciate the feedback. I will also email you the link. So if you are hustling off to something else right now and don't have should only take about 2 to 3 minutes. But if you don't have the time right now to go into that survey, I will email it to you along with a recording from this, the slides as a PDF, and those other resources. I will stick around for another couple minutes if you do have questions or comments and want to add them in, but I also don't want to keep you over. So thank you for attending. If you need to sign off, no problem. But again, if you do have a comment or something you want to add in, I can stick around.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you
Thanks.
for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kayla and Teresa.